America's proud legacy of leadership in space.
The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 3 of the Disclosing the Secret Space Program webcast series. I'm your host, Jordan Sather, and in this episode, it's going to be done in 3 parts. First, I'm going to be giving a presentation. Then we're going to be moving into an interview with our guest, Niara Isley. And then in the third part, we're going to go into a live discussion and actually give you live viewers here an opportunity to ask us questions. So let's begin. Let's talk about the 3 M's, okay? MK Ultra, MILABs, and moon bases. And to begin, we're going to be discussing what MILABs actually are. This will give you a good understanding of the term, what it involves, and help you understand Niara and her testimony and what she has to offer. So MILAB stands for military abduction. And this term is actually not necessarily too conspiratorial. You can see Wiktionary actually has an entry for MILAB, and it describes a MILAB as being a deceitful military operation performed to convince the targets of the operation that they have had an encounter with extraterrestrial beings as though it is a staged ploy. And while this is one definition for it, it's sort of more an umbrella term. Many programs actually fall under the MILAB umbrella, such as various grooming programs or actual abductions, as this Wiktionary entry states. And you could essentially term it into what could be known as aware and unaware MILABs. You know, an unaware MILAB may be a person that is taken without their knowledge. They don't know where they're going or what's exactly happening. But we'll discuss the grooming programs as well, and how somebody could be led into various programs, but maybe they're not given the full information as to what they're actually getting into. So to find the right candidate, the military, for these specific MILAB programs or whatever they want to do with the MILABs, throughout our schooling, societal actually has tracking programs such as standardized test scores to identify proper candidates to go into these programs. I've actually been told before that even many popular video games or board games are actually very subtle, essentially tracking programs, or you could call them they look at people and how they do in these various games or whatnot to see their abilities. And those who stand out particularly well, they monitor them and potentially try to get them to go into the military and be used in various programs. So people are identified based on psychological or genetic identifiers. The humans with particular or desired markers, such as those with possibly various ancient or ET lineage strains in their DNA, or it could even be people who are contactees that the government knows about. They are monitored, and their families may be contacted and then convinced to place them into special programs. Now, if you're familiar with Corey Good's testimony, this is essentially what happened to him. He was identified, and his parents actually knew that he was going to various programs after school, even though they weren't giving the full breadth of understanding as to what he was actually doing or what he was going to do upon graduation from these programs in his youth. So once these people who are identified, these candidates, go into the military, their traits are essentially exploited. So as they graduate public school, head into military service, they are then convinced and or forced to go into black projects to then serve. Some people are told, okay, you're going to be encountering this amazing technology, but you can't say anything about it. You're going to have to cut contact with your friends and family for this certain amount of time, but you're going to go into these programs, and these candidates, they aren't necessarily fully aware of what's going to be going on, but yes, they then choose to go into these programs. Or, as you'll hear in Niara's case, they are forced to go into these black projects, and we'll talk about memory swiping and how they might not even know what's going on or what they're getting into in a few minutes here. And as an example, a candidate may have displayed, for instance, heightened telepathic abilities. They may be an intuitive empath in nature, and thus they would be helpful to use in various programs done by various factions, corporate contractors, or military black projects. So they have these people identified. They say, oh, they would be very good in this project, and then they either convince or force them to go into this project so they can then utilize their gifts, abilities, powers, etc. And then family members of military members in the programs. So family members of military personnel that have been in programs are often pinpointed for their desired traits, whether it's physical, psychological, genetic, etc. And then a child may be then groomed because he was a child of somebody that's been in projects before. So that particular trait gets passed down psychologically, genetically. So then that particular person might be a perfect MILAB candidate. Or the entire family itself may be monitored as part of a genetic testing program. So say somebody was in a program in the military and they're not even aware of it. Maybe they're injected with something via vaccine or whatnot. The people overseeing that program want to monitor how that vaccine affects the family, affects the child, so they're then tested. And there could be various ways that these programs are done or made, but the MILABs in this state, those who are groomed, that's how they go into them. And as the MILAB soft disclosure in popular culture can be seen in this very popular TV show on the Netflix streaming network, Stranger Things. So this popular series that started in 2016 and is still currently running displays a MILAB scenario and even showed MK Ultra information on screen. In the show, based around essentially the Montauk Project, which was an MK Ultra offshoot, one of the protagonists called 11, she was termed 11 because she was one of the 11th person in this project. She escapes the program and actually comes to term with her strong superconscious abilities. And I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but she comes to term with her superconscious abilities and she gets out of the projects that she was in the show. But this is essentially a case of a MILAB. And you can watch the show to get a little bit more understanding of how this might operate. They actually forced her against her will to do various experiments and testing, especially because of her telepathic or psychological abilities. And now let's have a word on fake alien abductions. So some MILAB programs actually involve abduction scenarios for various psychological operation purposes. And this is the understanding that Wiktionary page offered us, was that fake alien abductions are actually staged where humans in covert projects may dress up as extraterrestrials, whether it's to look like a gray or to look like this being or that being, and then they abduct various subjects and do testing on them. So the subject may be put out with a various drug. They don't necessarily remember it too consciously, but they get blips in their memory of them being abducted by what they think is aliens, and then they're returned to their homes. They wake up and they go, oh my gosh, what's this on my body, or what happened to me last night? They get very fleeting memories, and then they go tell their friends and family what happened. So this could be many contactee cases, some of them at least, have evolved in actual MILAB scenario where they're abducted, they think it's aliens, but it's really humans in suits, just to give them that fear component so they can spread that story to their friends and family, maybe the general public, and then the fear is associated with that story that they bring out to the collective consciousness. So it's a very deep psychological operation that could occur, that may occur, and may be used for various agendas, because there's always that fear component with extraterrestrials that the cabal tries to put forth. So that is discussing MILABs. And now I want to get into talking about MK Ultra and the evolution of mind control projects throughout the last century essentially. And MK Ultra is the official name for various CIA mind control programs that were officially sanctioned in 1953 and ran until 1973. And in 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a cache of about 20,000 documents relating to Project MK Ultra, which weren't destroyed. Many of the original documents concerning MK Ultra were destroyed, but some of them survived. They were found through a FOIA request and essentially forced to be released to the public, and that actually led to Senate hearings later that year. So this is not a conspiracy theory per se, that as if it never happened or somebody just made it up. In fact, it is by definition a conspiracy, because it was there was a lot of people who created a plan to do unto the population, but it is real and there's much evidence about it. And MK Ultra disclosure in national news is actually still going on. This article right here I wanted to share with you because it came out in Canadian national news very recently, just a few months ago at the end of 2017. And in their national news service, the National Post, ran this article detailing how Allison Steele, her mother, Jean Steele, was subject to trauma-based mind control therapies in 1957 at a Canadian hospital by Dr. Ewen Cameron. Ewen Cameron is a large name in the MK Ultra documents, and he was a past president of the American Psychiatric Association, and he ran many of these tests on his subjects at this Canadian hospital in 1957. It's still being disclosed through media sources, and this was a great story that came out detailing some of the mind control projects that happened. And when MK Ultra was going on, the CIA actually had tentacles in many different institutions around North America, not just in Canada, but Stanford as well as one of the associated institutions. And there was some 80, if not more than that, various foundations, universities, and institutions that either got money or participated in experimentations for the CIA for these programs. And let's talk about MK Ultra's Nazi roots. So many of these programs and the research and experimentation that was conducted in them in the CIA programs in the 1950s and 60s actually stemmed from Nazi Germany. They got many of their methods from that were developed in Nazi Germany in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. So the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations was set up in London in 1921 to study the breaking point of humans. Kurt Lewin, a German psychologist, became the director of the Tavistock Institute in 1932. And about the same time, Nazi Germany was increasing its research into neuropsychology, parapsychology, and multi-generational occultism. So you can see a German scientist, German psychologist, became the head of an English institute in 1932 in pre-World War II. So there's always these shadowy groups, these shadowy factions that have their hands in multiple nations when there are public wars going on. There's always groups behind the scenes that, are funding or consulting or whatnot both sides of nearly every war. And World War II is no exception. Much of the preliminary experimentation concerning genetic engineering and behavior modification was conducted by Dr. Joseph Mengele at Auschwitz. He was actually analyzing the effects of trauma on his subjects at this concentration camp during World War II. And besides surgical experimentation, electroshock and other tests occurred to figure out how to create alters, how to find that breaking point in the human subconscious mind and actually reprogram the minds in various ways. Now, these methods, like I said, were first being created and done in World War II Germany. But then, of course, we have Operation Paperclip, where after World War II, a secret program of the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency in American military brought thousands of German scientists and experts from post-Nazi Germany into America and into government and corporations to be employed. Literally thousands of German scientists emigrated over from World War II Germany into America here and were put to use. They went into various aerospace programs. They went into media. They went into medical and pharmaceutical corporations as well, and also intelligence agencies. So these MK Ultra programs stemmed from method and research that were brought over by Operation Paperclip scientists. So thousands of these scientists came over. They infiltrated themselves into many different areas and institutions of society, and that's when throughout the latter half of the 20th century and even until today, we still see many of these methods in action in aerospace, pharmaceutical industry, the media industry, and so forth. And I want to talk about a particular MK Ultra subsection termed Project Monarch. Now, going through Project Monarch, I want to do here because it's going to give you a clearer picture as to various ways people's minds are programmed and how you actually see that happen now. So we have a handful of different examples here of essentially patsies, how these people are controlled and what they might be controlled to do. So let's go through these levels: alpha, beta, delta, theta, omega, and gamma. And just for a note really quick, this research comes from Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips from a 1992 speech of theirs called the Green Bomb Speech. So you can look into Kathy O'Brien's research and her testimony because it's a fantastic way to understand a bit more about MK Ultra and what's actually going on, because she was subject to it herself. So let's discuss first the alpha range of Monarch programming within MK Ultra. So the alpha programming is regarded as general or regular programming within the base control personality. It's characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention along with substantially increased physical strength and visual acuity. Alpha programming is accomplished through deliberate subdividing of the victim's personality, which causes a left brain, right brain division. And then once that division is broken, it can then be reprogrammed with neural pathway stimulation between the two hemispheres. And when reading this, you hear about the increased physical strength, increased visual acuity, pronounced memory retention. What this might remind you of is a sort of super soldier or something to that effect. I mean, we see that disclosed in media in, for instance, Captain America. You know, he was, his consciousness was broken and then he was rebuilt back with different strengths and capabilities. And this is under the alpha range of the Monarch programming. So in the beta range, this is often referred to as sexual programming. This programming eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitive sexual instinct, completely devoid of inhibitions. And various cat alters may come out at this level. So when you look at, of course, Hollywood and many of the people that are unfortunately in Hollywood at these levels, you can see much of the many of the pictures, many of the videos, many of the marketing done has them painted up and dressed as cats. This is that cat programming come out in the beta level. It's very sexually oriented. It's programming that primal energy within us in certain ways and agendas that they want us to be, whoever's doing that Monarch programming, of course. And then we have the Delta range. This is known as killer programming, originally developed for training special agents, elite soldiers. It could be mercenaries or contractors, for instance, for use in covert operations. Optimal adrenal output and controlled aggression is evident because, of course, you have more adrenaline hormones pumping out that will make them particularly think in fight or flight responses, and that will allow the programs to come forth and be the dominant factor. Subjects are devoid of fear, very systematic in carrying out their assignment, and self-destruct or suicide instructions are layered in at this level. So, of course, we see a lot of false flags and various terrorist attacks happen these days, and many of the patsies, per se, or people carrying out these attacks, they could be under the Delta program range. They're controlled to do this certain operation, and many of them commit suicide and whatnot, and that could actually be layered into their subconscious to go and do. The theta range is considered to be psychic programming. Those who have been determined to exhibit greater telepathic abilities are typically used here. And due to its evident limitations, and by limitations, this particularly means that if you have strong psychic abilities, it's going to be more difficult to control that person. For instance, if you're trying to memory swipe them, which we'll talk about in a minute here, maybe they'll have a greater propensity to remember their memories, or they'll be more difficult to break into altars and then put different programs into. So because of these limitations, various forms of electronic mind control systems were developed and introduced, namely biomedical human devices, actual implants somewhere, or directed energy lasers using microwave and or electromagnetics. So these people who are used in theta programming and have these particular abilities are often targeted because, of course, those who are programming them don't want them to remember what happened or don't want them to see what's actually going on. So then they're targeted to keep them suppressed after the programming is induced. And it's reported that these people are used in conjunction with highly advanced computers and sophisticated satellite tracking systems. So these computers could be hooked up to the person's conscious mind, and that could be used in various programs, for instance, the Montauk program, or sophisticated satellite tracking systems are particularly targeting these subjects because, of course, they are more able to break free of their programming, or the satellite tracking is actually assisting in their mind control, assisting in the brainwashing, because it could be targeting various frequencies into that subject to then program them with. So you can look into, for instance, the voice of God or voice to skull technologies for how that might operate. They can actually program brainwave range. So this is a self-destruct form of programming, also known as code green. The corresponding behaviors include suicidal tendencies and or self-mutilation. This program is generally activated when the victim or survivor begins therapy or interrogation and too much memory is being recovered. So much like I was mentioning in the theta range, Omega very much ties in with that. So if someone is remembering their memories or they were captured, this specific program can be activated and then the subject can be essentially remotely taken out in a way. And then the last one is the gamma. And gamma is another form of system protection, and this is through deception programming. So this elicits a form of misinformation or misdirected that is put into the victim or the subject's conscious mind, and this level is intertwined with what could be termed as demonology and tends to regenerate itself at a later time if inappropriately deactivated. So as of late March 2018 here, we have had various instances, attacks, false flags, occurrences, if you want to call them that lately, where the shooter in a mass shooting or the assailant in a certain incident on a military installation or what have you, they're actually hearing demon voices after their attack occurs. You know, maybe this shooter will hear demon voices, or this person will hear what they call demon voices. They don't really consciously realize what they're even hearing, but then they say things or do certain things. So they could actually fall into that gamma range. And you can also see how these might interlap or intertwine with each other. There may be one person or one subject who is undergoing multiple levels of this programming for, of course, whatever they're needed to carry out. So understanding these different levels of Project Monarch programming, you can then begin to understand maybe how MILABs are taken and then what happens to them, or you begin to see much better what's really going on with certain occurrences in current events and breaking news and whatnot. So I just thought this was very helpful to go over. And let's discuss some of that MK Ultra or Monarch programming in pop culture. So you might be very familiar with the popular movie and book series called Bourne Identity, Bourne Supremacy, Jason Bourne. In this movie right here, the most recent one that came out in 2016. And this whole series revolves around David Webb, also known as Jason Bourne. David Webb's his real name in the movie. But he was a mind-controlled CIA assassin who began overcoming his memory swiping. He actually failed his mission. He was getting back some of his memories as to what occurred, and then he went on his own personal mission to figure out what actually happened to him and what was going on in the CIA programs he was in. And what's funny is that one alias that they actually gave him in the movie is Delta. And we have the connection to the Monarch programming that we were just going over, where Delta is that killer programming where they basically program assassins to go out and carry out different operations. So it's as if they were literally showing us the truth with a couple hints in plain sight right there in Jason Bourne. And now let's discuss some of the techniques used to control the mind of individual targets. And I classified this into two different types of trauma. Trauma is particularly what they use to mind control subjects, because with trauma, that's what fractures the subconscious and creates that alter that can then be called upon and programmed. And I divided this into two sections, one that we would call no-touch trauma and one that we call touch trauma. So the no-touch trauma could involve such things as drugs or electroshock therapy or frequencies, targeted frequencies that are utilized. And then we have touch trauma, which is where sexual abuse and sexual acts are used to fracture a person's mind and then control them. So let's discuss some of the no-touch traumas. And of course we have drugs. And it's very well known that the drug LSD was originally used in MK Ultra programs to mind control people with. By the mid-1950s, the CIA had managed to secure a monopoly on LSD. There was actually a scientist who accidentally stumbled upon it. He was touching some things in his lab and he touched the fungus that had LSD in it that he was making, and then he went on a hallucination, figured out what it was. The CIA caught wind of that and wanted to utilize it in some of their mind study programs, so they then secured that monopoly on LSD. And at first, the agency personnel tested LSD only on themselves, but later decided that they would slip LSD into each other's food or drinks without prior notice just to observe the effects of it. And then they went into experimentation on test subjects, whether it was people who signed up just to be in the study, or it was actual, could be MILABs, or people who were forced or unaware that they were being studied on with LSD. And then, of course, this drug experimentation reached down into university campuses and other public institutions across the United States. Like I mentioned earlier, the CIA had many institutions, connections, universities that they did these MK Ultra testing programs on and with. And scopolamine deserves to be mentioned here. This is where we're going to talk about memory swiping and how that occurs. So scopolamine, if I'm having that right, is the most common drug used by various agencies or groups to blank slate people's memories, as it's so termed, or effectively memory swipe them as well. So it's actually extracted from the devil's breath plant, which is a plant that's native to South America. You can see it on the top picture here. They extract scopolamine out of it, and it's turned into a fine powder. And once you touch this powder, it absorbs directly into the bloodstream, and very soon after that, it'll put the victim into a essentially zombie-like state, and they can then be controlled to do whatever the perpetrator wants, and they won't have any recollection as to what occurred. So scopolamine is often injected or somehow gotten into subjects, and that's how it's memory swiped. Of course, we have the popular movie Men in Black, where they have their little device that does the memory swiping. That's sort of a hint. Of course, there's much more to it, but it's sort of a hint as to how this memory swiping or this blank slating could, in essence, take place. Then we have electroshock and frequency targeting to get to fracture people's minds and to control them. So when a person is undergoing trauma induced by electroshock, a feeling of lightheadedness is evidence, as if one is floating or fluttering like a butterfly. And when you bring occultic symbolism into the picture, it actually explains why it's particularly called monarch programming. Not monarch meaning king or queen or aristocrat, but monarch meaning a butterfly. That's the symbolism for that. And it's often a symbolism for the psyche coming into essentially a new reincarnation or a new way of being. And that's why they called it monarch programming, because when they fracture a person's consciousness and they reincarnate them, in essence, they bring a new person into being. And you can also see in a lot of mainstream marketing that comes out from the cabal that a butterfly is often symbolized with many of their puppets, you could call them, that they use to market and in media and Hollywood and whatnot. And then we have touch trauma, and this is of course one of the darkest, most awful, if they're not all awful, but deserves to be talked about here. Sexual abuse is a major part of these mind control programs because of how primal that sort of energy is to the human experience. That organ, as Wilhelm Reich called it, it's that sexual primal life force energy that is very strong, and it's easy to create programmable alters devoid of that moral conviction, like we talked about going over the monarch sections, within the human subconscious mind when sexual trauma is induced upon the mind control victim. So that is one way that they utilize different types of traumas to program people. So it could be various traumas. They could use drugs, frequencies, and sexual abuse. There's multiple ways that they will try to program their victim. And then we could talk about trauma-based mind control en masse. So many of these ways to mind control that we just talked about, drug, electroshock, and sexual abuse, while we were discussing them from a more first-person perspective as if it was happening to a singular human, you could even discuss these times of trauma en masse, because our whole society is traumatized to keep us in a perpetual state of fear, so then we can be easily programmed and go along with nefarious agendas that don't serve us. So when it comes to mass drugging for mind control, we can talk about medical trauma, how a lot of boys these days will undergo circumcision, a lot of babies of either gender will undergo forced vaccination. These are very traumatic to the young mind and will fracture that consciousness. It will cause issues later on in life of disconnection because of that trauma. A lot of people don't think that a newborn that young will remember it and it won't affect them later in life, but those types of things absolutely do. And then there's pharmaceutical, fluoride, and food trauma. Fluoride is often said that was originally used in Nazi concentration camps because it would put people into a kind of zombie-like daze. It would literally lower their IQ and make them easier to control en masse. And so it deserves to be discussed here how fluoride is put into so many municipal water systems and literally into pharmaceuticals and into certain supplements people take and whatnot. It's put into us in various ways to make us easier to program, to lower our IQ on a societal level. And then food. Eating bad food and doing various bad habits, that's a form of trauma that someone does to themselves in essence. And that is just a lack of essential self-love that they have for themselves, and that is actually micro-traumatizing to them. We have electromagnetics on a mass scale, Gwen towers, 4G, 5G, everywhere, causing us to be perpetually bathed in electrosmog. And this is very harmful to someone's DNA, to their physical, mental, emotional, spiritual selves. It's very traumatizing to one. And then microwaves, and of course there's this particular targeted microwaves as well that might be targeted on a specific population for any reason. And then trauma via mainstream media and deep state fabrication. So those are the events that you see in the news and whatever the propaganda machines try to put out there to traumatize society and then get them to go along with certain agendas or narratives. And for the third part of this presentation, so we went over MILABs, we went over MK Ultra. Now I want to discuss the moon. So there's been a lot of talk, of course, in alternative media and people looking for the truth that the moon landings were fake. And this is a very black and white thing that I see many people discuss it as. It's either as fake or it wasn't. Either we got there or we didn't. And I want to just touch on this subject. I mean, all these subjects that I'm touching on in this presentation go in line with Niara's testimony, but particularly the moon subject I want to talk about because, at least in mine and many other people's opinions, there is a multi-layered way that this could very well have happened. It could be essentially fake and not fake at the very same time. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So we have public versus private moon programs. While on one hand, NASA may very well be a type of smoke screen put out there on a public scale to hide exotic technologies and covert space program, that doesn't mean they lie to us about every single thing and that we did not go to the moon in public NASA programs. It's very plausible that fake moon landings were filmed in somebody somewhere's basement or studio as a cover for what really happened on the public moon missions. So by this, I mean there could have very well been some kind of either fake moon landing filmed for a disinformation campaign, for to confuse or a psychological operation, or as a cover measure in case the official operation failed. Maybe NASA or American military officials didn't want to be embarrassed on a world stage, so they filmed the fake just in case things didn't go according to plan, and that would be broadcast everywhere and embarrass and make some people look bad. So there's a lot of things you have to put into play to really get a good idea of what could have very well happened on the moon. And according to William Tompkins' testimony, his testimony sheds a lot of light as to why these fakes might have been filmed and put out there, and what actually happened when the Apollo missions got to the moon. So they got to the moon, according to William Tompkins, but they did not tell us what truly happened when they got there. So what William Tompkins said was that when Apollo 11 landed in the crater, you can see William Tompkins' drawing of what he witnessed occurred. He actually saw the live feed when Apollo 11 originally landed. They were met by extraterrestrial craft. Not only that, but there were certain parts of the video that had structures in them as well. Certain things that NASA did not want to divulge to the broader public. So since that was on the live stream, they were going to have to edit that, cut that, doctor that before they put it out to the public because they didn't want to disclose those things quite yet. So maybe some of the videos that are out there are real, but some of them are fake as well. They're actually fakes put in circulation to confuse people, to maybe make people look down upon those searching for truth or confuse those searching for truth. You can see how this type of psychological operation could have benefit by those putting out the fake moon landing videos, even though we really got there. And what really William Tompkins told us is that the moon is actually a big command center, that not only have humans gone there in secret space programs, even all the way back into the German secret society involvement in secret space programs pre-World War II in the early 1900s, but many extraterrestrial civilizations have also already been on the moon and have been there for a long time. And even the moon could even have been an extraterrestrial creation, a kind of craft, if you will, an organic craft. And here's a couple quotes from an interview done with William Tompkins. The one on the left here is saying, first of all, it's not our moon. Second of all, it's not even a moon. That's a great way to understand that it's not a natural celestial object that's orbiting us. I mean, the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth and has for thousands of years. That's a very peculiar data point when trying to understand what the moon really is. Was it placed there? How is it at such a perfect rotation to always face the Earth? And then the second quote of Tompkins here says, "Your moon is a command center for this region of the galaxy, not just the solar system, but this galaxy. The solar system is just small potatoes." So these are a couple interesting perspectives to have on the moon and how it got there, what it really is, how it was built out, and so forth. So, like I said, the moon is essentially a neutral observation station in use by humans in secret space programs and also in use by many other extraterrestrial civilizations for a long time. The German secret society space programs during and pre-World War II were the first true moon missions from our current civilization. Bases are made with very advanced tunneling and construction technologies. The construction process is made easier by using naturally formed lava tubes or building off pre-existing construction. And this pre-existing construction could be recently done by, of course, secret space programs, but it could also have been extraterrestrial construction that was done thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of years ago. And then they were able to tunnel down a little bit more through this tunnel or through this room or something to that effect. So the moon has been built out extensively. It is there's a pact made by all the beings and groups and factions that use the moon that it is a neutral place. It's like a Switzerland, if you will. And there are meant to be no hostile actions that take place there. So in Tompkins' drawing here, the reason that he said they were reptilian craft, the reason they didn't engage the small Apollo lander, they basically told the people on Apollo to take some rocks and take some pictures and then get out of there, is because the moon is a neutral station, and that's agreed upon by all that use it. And let's talk about some soft disclosures of the moon in popular media. It's been a theme throughout this presentation, and I'm trying to offer you some soft disclosures, some truth in plain sight with a lot of these concepts, so to help it hit home in you, if you will. So the movie Iron Sky that came out in 2012, you can see the Internet Movie Database article of it right here. It actually depicted the Nazis trying to set up secret bases on the dark side of the moon all the way back in 1945, where they would hide out and plan to return to power in 2018. So I have not personally actually seen this movie, but I have seen outtakes and pictures of it. They actually have a station on the backside of the moon in a swastika shape. So it's a massive disclosure, soft disclosure, where they're saying there was actually German secret space programs that already got to the dark side of the moon. This movie says they were planning to return to power in 2018, but of course they were infiltrating into different aspects of not only American but worldwide government post-World War II. But Iron Sky is an interesting movie to see these concepts that were put out en masse. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation that I offered you today on MILAB's military abductions, MK Ultra, and what could have really gone on with the moon and what is going on with the moon. Now we'll be showing a quick clip of an animation of Corey Goode's testimony of his flyover into a base on the moon, and then after that short animated clip that was made by one of our artists, Renee Armenta, we will be showing the interview done with Niara Isley. Then, of course, after that, we'll be doing the live Q&A. So I hope you enjoy this animation and this interview coming up. We'll be talking to you guys very shortly here.
Light the story fires. Light the sacred sage and cedar. Smell the sweet grass. Be at peace. Join this circle with full hearts. Come with open hearts. Sit with clear hearts. Listen with strong hearts. See me. I am tying my ankle to a stake in the earth that I may make my stand with courage. I am taking back my power from those who stole it long ago. Hear me. This is my medicine story for the healing of my spirit. This is stone medicine of memory and water medicine of hidden depths. Hear me. This is my prayer to Sky Father, to Earth Mother. This is what happened long ago. This is what has been forgotten and must now be remembered. This is what has been hidden and must now be revealed. Hear me. This is for all people everywhere. My name is Niara Isley. I'm 63 years old, and my background is varied. I was in the military, and I did have a set of very extraordinary and disturbing experiences. Going public, I will first off say going public is not for everyone. You have to think about your family. You have to think about how you feel. You have to think if you have the ability to stand up in front of people and say what's so. And if you're willing to take the flack, because we do get flack for coming out and speaking truth to power. And so you have to do that. I decided that I had the strength of character and the will and the passion to make the world a better place to do this. So here I am. Ever since I was just a little girl, I was always interested in everything. I wrote in my book here that when I was a little girl, I would say something to myself like this: I want to know the really real truth of myself and the universe I live in and my place in it. You know, so that was kind of like a guiding mantra through my whole life, and it's led me to where I am today. And I studied an awful lot of science as a young girl, way beyond what was required of me by school, and a lot of my early life really prepared me for where I am today and what I'm doing with my life today as a whistleblower. I was involved in at least, you know, well, back to childhood, I was a experiencer, abductee of the gray ETs, and was used for breeding by them, as a lot of women have been. But then later in life, when I joined the U.S. Air Force, I got taken out in the middle of the night to test the radar on quote-unquote special aircraft, exotic aircraft. We didn't see them until we went outside the radar van, but on the radar scope, these things would light up in one area of the scope and then almost literally disappear from one area and then would go on another one, on another area of the scope. They were moving very fast and like nothing that we had ever seen on our scopes before. Once the test was over and I went outside the radar van, I was standing on the deck there with two other people, men, and we had all participated in running that test together because it took about 3 people to run the radar that I was working with at that time. And we were forbidden to speak to each other, but we were looking in the sky and there were saucers up in the sky. And probably as many as 12 to 15. You know, I didn't really count them because I was scared to death. And there was one that was closest to us, and so I really focused on absorbing as much as I could about the one that was closest as I could. And it was big, it was saucer shaped, it was glowing orange on the bottom, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like there was a spin on the bottom, but what it actually was lights on the bottom of the craft lighting up in sequence to kind of give the appearance of a spin, and it was glowing orange. And the sound coming from it was like music, not music, but the sound speakers make at a rock concert when there's no music coming through. There's kind of that staticky hum. That was both the noise and the sensation I had. It was kind of like the hair standing up on your arms. So that was what it was like to look at it and experience it. Well, I got out of the military, and of course I was caught up in being a mom and a wife and, you know, regular human life things and so on and so forth. And then I ended up getting divorced, got into another relationship, and it didn't go well because PTSD was part of my life back then. I didn't really know that it was PTSD, nor would I even figure out why did I have PTSD. So anyway, I kind of drifted around after these two relationships went away, and I was talking to a friend in a bookstore in Las Vegas, and he knew that I was in the Air Force, but every time the subject would come up, he would notice that I would change the subject, and I would kind of skate away from it. And he sat me down one afternoon and he said, "Tell me about your Air Force time." He said, "Can you do that?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, I went in at Lackland Air Force Base in April of '79, and then I went to technical training school at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and then I went home on leave for a while. Then I went to my first duty station, which was an Ellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and I worked at Tonopah Electronic Warfare Range. And as soon as I finished saying Tonopah Electronic Warfare Range, I stopped talking because this wave of nausea came over me, and I looked at him and I said, "I can't remember anything about being at Tonopah," and I was there for at least 3 months, maybe 4. And I was just shocked. I was just in absolute shock, and I just couldn't remember. And I have a pretty good memory, you know, and I can remember all kinds of things, even from early life, but I couldn't remember those 3 months. After I realized I couldn't remember 3 months, I worked really hard to try to get into that black hole by thinking about people that I knew before I went to Nellis and people I knew after I left Nellis. And I tried to use those friendships and acquaintances to work my way back into that time, because I knew we were all there at Nellis together, and I still couldn't do it. The only thing I could come up with was social events from the time period, like a party that we all had out at Lake Mead, you know, and Jim Butler days where they had a beard growing contest, just inconsequential stuff. But that's all I could do. And then finally I ran into Bud Hopkins at the Whole Life Expo, and I did hypnosis with him to try to track into that time period and find out what the heck happened to me, because it was terrifying to have that much memory just gone.
Gotcha. And what did you begin to find in doing the therapy with Bud Hopkins?
Well, I found out that I was taken out in the middle of the night to test the radar on these UFOs, or let's just say at alien spacecraft or back engineered craft. There might have been both different kinds out there. And then we were put on a bus with painted over windows. It was kind of like an old school bus, painted navy blue, or I should say Air Force blue. And we were taken to some kind of facility out on the Nevada desert, and for a long time I thought it was Area 51, and I still think it could be. But there was also another underground facility at Tonopah that was discussed posthumously in one of Stephen Greer's whistleblower segments with William Pollock. You know, and it was such sensitive information that William Pollock did the interview on the condition that it would only be released after he passed away. So once he passed away, that interview was released to the internet, and I watched it and found out about the underground facility at Tonopah. So either Area 51 or the Tonopah facility was taken to a medical dispensary type of place. Not quite a hospital, but you know, a place where they do exams and dispense medicine. And I was sat down in a waiting room with the lights off. Everything they did seemed to be to cover memory, to make sure that if anybody did remember anything, being in a room with the lights off, you wouldn't be able to see the people clearly, things like that. I was given fatigues to wear that night, with no rank insignia, no name tags, no identifying marks of any kind. Was forbidden to speak to the other people that I was out there with, beyond what was necessary to run the test. So the situation they put us in was very isolating and very frightening, terrifying actually. And So we got to this facility, we sat down in this waiting room with the lights off, and I still see it really clearly. I could draw a picture. And one by one we had to go off to the side in this little room. Finally they called my name and I went into the little room, and it was a small room. There was a security guard in there in desert camo fatigues wearing a sidearm. He was standing at parade rest. And I was told to lay down on this stainless steel examining table that looked old, like it was maybe from the 40s or 50s. And I laid down on there fully clothed, didn't have to take anything off. And I waited for a long time with that security guard watching me. And finally some guy in a white lab coat came in, the same door I had gone in, to the room in. And he said, "Stay calm," 3 times in this really deadpan, monotone voice. And he walked past the security guard, up the right side of the table, got up to the right side of my head, and then he had a hypodermic needle hidden in the sleeve of his lab coat, and he injected me in the side of the neck right here. And whatever the chemical was went straight to my brain. And it was just really scary. Then suddenly I'm kind of taken on more, I'm kind of stopping with Bud's hypnosis, because at the point that the injection happened, I spontaneously came out of the hypnosis because I couldn't take anymore. And then later on I did hypnosis with another person, and we found out what happened after that. So I'm going to kind of continue. So I'm kind of in shock from whatever this injection's doing to me, because it went straight to the brain, and I was like, you know, in shock. Suddenly there's 2 guys on either side of that table pulling me up by the arms and dragging me off the table and down through this doorway where there was a long flight of stairs going down. And for some reason I remember it as one long flight going down, not switchbacks like a lot of store cases are. It was just straight down. They half carried me, half dragged me down those stairs. And at the bottom of the stairs there was like this little room that had a one-way mirror in it. And I went through the effects of that injection in that room. And I felt like, I've described it so many ways down through the years. It was kind of like feeling like your body's turning to soda pop fizz or beer foam. It's just like, you know, when your leg goes to sleep and it comes back and there's all the pins and needles and tingling and everything else like that. It was like that was happening to my whole body. But super duper intense pins and needles. And I just curled up on the floor and just screamed because it was just doing this number on me, you know. And I felt like I was coming apart somehow. I don't know why or how I thought that, but that's how my body felt. It felt like it was just going to come apart and run down a drain in the floor. And I had a feeling that because that mirrored thing on the wall, I think it was a one-way mirror, and they were looking at me through the mirror to watch me go through the effects of this. And I racked my brain to try to come up with some idea of what this injection was and what it was for. And the only thing I've been able to come up with is maybe they were trying to create a chemical version of ascension. They wanted something they could inject into somebody that would cause them to ascend. And if they knew anything about me at all, they know I've been a really spiritual person from early childhood on. Maybe they thought if they tried this injection on me, it would somehow work better because I already had the spiritual mindset. But all it did was just really traumatize me. And I've also really wondered about, you know, why they watched me through the one-way glass, the one-way mirror. And I got some ideas from the movie Lucy, where she's over like in Hong Kong or the Orient someplace and gets pulled into this really nasty drug trafficking, and they sew this drug inside of her that then starts leaking And then she experiences this incredibly rapid evolutionary process. But there was a scene in the aircraft, and when she was flying on a plane, where she went to the bathroom and her molecules started to fly apart. And that's how I felt. That's what I felt like was going to happen to me. And I did have some consciousness altering effects from it over a few years after. You know, like waking up one morning in my apartment and holding very still because I felt like if I was going to blink, reality was just going to shatter around me and I didn't know where I would wind up. You know, I mean, I had some definite strange experiences from that. Plus, when they had her open the briefcase that had the drug in it, they all hid behind shields. So I'm wondering, maybe they put me in a booth because they were afraid that what I was going through would spill over onto them. I don't know. I try to find answers as best I can. There was this blonde security guard, and I'm pretty sure was some kind of psychopath. He was like a handler. And he took me down where these hangars were, where they keep the craft. And he handed me this set of silver clothes. And he said, you have to put them on over bare skin, so you got to take everything off and put these on. So I had to stand there in the hangar with all these people walking around and put the silver suit on. And once it was shapeless when I had it in my hands. When I put it on, it fit itself to my body very closely. And that was kind of amazing, you know, that was kind of strange. Then I was getting on the craft, and that security guard, see you when you get back, sweetheart, and I knew that meant more abuse. Then I got on the craft. I was told to lay down on the floor, and there was 2 other guys laying on the floor there too. We were to be transported kind of like cargo, was the way it seemed to me. We didn't rate sitting in chairs. The chairs were for other people. So we went on there, and there was like a distortion of time. When the craft started to move, I could feel it as it lifted off. There was a feeling of being pressed into the floor, but it only lasted a few seconds. And then it was off and going. And I can't really tell you if it was a 20 or 30 minute trip, or, you know, it was just disorienting, being on that and feeling it moving and wondering how much time is transpiring, and then we're on the moon. And they told us when we got off the moon, to just walk straight ahead to the building and not to look to the right or the left or up or down or anything else like that. Just walk straight in there and don't do anything, just do exactly what we tell you. And these were pretty scary people, so we did what we were told. And so I remember walking out, and I'm keeping my eyes straight forward, and I'm thinking, I'm on the moon, I'm breathing, is there air here? Is there a dome above? And then my eyes would go up, and I would say, don't turn your head. Okay, and just keep walking. But it was really bizarre, because I thought, you know, unless there's a dome, there's some kind of atmosphere on this planet. So that was kind of interesting. And there was some kind of excavation equipment that I worked on that I think I also had a dream about later on.
Can you describe that equipment?
Yeah, the excavation equipment was like big steel or metal of some kind, electromagnetic plates. And there was a way to turn on the machine, and these 2 plates would be together like this. You turn on the machine and they would somehow vibrate themselves down into the ground. And then you'd turn on another switch, and the electromagnetic plates would generate like poles, like, you know how north and south attract, but south and south repel. Okay, so you turn on another switch, and those big plates have now vibrated themselves down into the ground start going like this. And because they're so huge, you know, they're excavating this big flat place where they would put a landing pad or maybe more buildings. So that's one of the things that I did when I was there. And the nights were more sexual assault. It was kind of like being passed around for entertainment to the men that were stationed up there or working up there. And it breaks the mind in such a way that you think, okay, whatever's happened to me, I can't do it. So what happens is you just disassociate. You just kind of go away in your mind, or you leave your body, because what's happening to your body is so unspeakable that you can't even be in it. And the trauma, you know, I mean, there's a term out there, trauma-based mind control. And that means that when someone is traumatized, they usually hypnotically record everything that they're experiencing in that moment. And if it's too much for the ego, the human ego, to handle, then the human mind will break off that piece of trauma and it'll stick it in the deep subconscious. And it'll stay there forever, or until you get to the point that you have the ability to look at it. And so that's what happened to me. And then when I found that I had the missing time, I had to know what the heck was in that missing time segment. And those that would control humanity for their own ends, and then those that want freedom for humanity and want us to evolve and become everything that we can be. You know, I want us to evolve and become everything that we can be. And so the person that these experiences happen to is a person who is educated herself extremely well in the sciences, a person who is artistic, who has an imagination, who has a passion, who was raised to be a constitutional patriot by her father. You know, that's who this happened to. And that's why I wrote the book, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. And that's why I get out there and speak, because I want a better world for everybody. You know, I want a world where this kind of crap never happens to me or anybody like me again, ever. When, right after my book was published, I took a box of books and went on the road, and weird things were to happen with my phone GPS in an area where cell signal strength should not have been a problem, like a big urban area. And it's like it would fail time, and this happened time after time after time, way beyond what would be considered random or accidental. And then as soon as the GPS failed, and I'm trying to get it back on while driving down the road, which, as we all know, isn't the greatest idea to be monkeying with the phone on the road, then my truck would start to swerve and act weird. And when I got back home, I talked to a few friends about this, and one of them said, you know, cars built after 2006, 2007 can be remotely hacked. They have these anti-theft systems that get put in the car, and it's ostensibly to shut it down in case it's stolen. But it's also, because it can be hacked for other reasons, they could hack right into your car and cause you to have an accident, or try to cause you to have an accident. And this happened so many times when I was on that trip. I cut my trip short by 2 weeks and came home because I felt like my life was in danger. And then the targeting just got worse from there. It's not just human beings that are targeting me with tech. I saw a healer at Shasta last summer, Eric Rains, and he was looking into my body to see what was wrong with it. And because my symptoms are kind of like this. I'll have all this body pain, and I'll see a body worker or new chiropractor or somebody, and they'll make the pain go away for this wonderful 24 to 72 hour period, and then boom, it comes right back in. And then all the work that they do from that time forward does no good. And this is over 20 years now. I've been living with levels of chronic pain, and this is it, you know. I get a practitioner, they make it better for a little while, and then I keep seeing that practitioner when the pain comes back, and it doesn't go away. So I've been dealing with a lot of pain for a lot of years, and it's getting wearing, and a lot of sleep deprivation from living in places that are just not ideal. And I think people in this audience will understand, when you're a highly sensitive person and you're empathic and intuitive, it's not just the physical noise and vibration of being around all these people, it's the psychic noise too. It's getting to be too much. You know, the more I evolve and become who I'm becoming, psychically and intuitively and spiritually, the harder it is to be around too many minds just vibrating at beta brainwaves with any kind of Tom, Dick, or Harry kind of thoughts going on out there. It's just really difficult. And the other psychic people out there are going to know what I'm talking about. So I'm trying to get a good home situation that'll help me get healed and at least, you know, do better. And have some space for my sensitivity to kind of relax and expand instead of be curled up like a shell, you know, in a shell. Let's see. Well, free energy, it would end the oil cartels and their power, which is why they're probably really, really against that technology coming out. I'm sure they got their fingers in all kinds of pies because money buys their way into everything. But with zero-point energy and really, you know, some of the electronics wizardry that's out there, and then some of the plant stuff too, we could remake this planet, we could clean up the pollution, we could make this planet be a really wonderful place for everybody to live. But the powers that are trying to keep this planet under control, they don't want that. They want to keep their asset, which is humanity, under control. Because they're mining us, they're farming our consciousness, and they're even mining our DNA. You know, we're a property asset in their minds, and they do not want us to evolve and ascend and discover who and what we really are, because then they will lose control over their human herd. But there are these other things called archons, and archons are actually described as looking reptilian or looking like the Greys. You know, fetal looking with big eyes. And these things consider themselves humanity's overlords, and they've been controlling us for hundreds of thousands of years, and they also control by attaching to humans that maybe have a greater propensity for selfishness and wanting power and fame and, you know, narcissistic types of individuals. So they attach to these kinds of individuals and start pushing those self-serving tendencies to extremes. And there's a great article I found on the web about this, and I will share that article with you. So I think reptilian is a good way to say it, even though it's kind of the easy answer. But it's not simply reptilians, it's humans that are under control of these creatures and kind of turning on their own kind, you know, willing to sell their soul to have power and control, even if it's just for a little while, you know. The more extreme they get, the more people wake up. And I would say people are waking up in droves now. So they hold up a contrast, and that's really kind of the spiritual core of life on Earth here anyway, because we want to understand why we're here. We want to answer those big cosmic questions. Who am I? What am I? What is my place in the scheme of the whole universe, you know? If I know I'm insignificant, but I'm here also, so it must be important to be here for some reason, otherwise I wouldn't be here. So people ask these big cosmic questions and they want answers. And the more they ask the questions, the more the universe guides them through synchronicities into places where they can begin to learn some of those answers. And of course I had tons of questions after discovering what happened to me. You know, why did this happen? In what political and social context could this happen in the United States of America that I was raised to think was the greatest country in the world? How can this happen here? And I found a lot of answers. And the contrast of the evil things that I found made me want to be even better. And the more dishonesty I see in government and in politics, the more I want to be a person of high integrity and love and caring for other people, you know, because this is where we really need to go. And I'm going to use an analogy from when I used to do drumming and dance workshops. When you're dancing out the energy of fear or anger or grief, it spends itself real quick. 5 minutes, you're dancing that stuff out of your system and it's done. But when you start dancing the higher vibrational things like love and joy, or drumming love or drumming joy and drumming happiness, it just goes on and on and on, because it creates an energy that feeds itself. It's self-perpetuating and self-sustaining. Positive energy goes forever. Negative energy, it has to keep rejuvenating itself because it's subject to entropy. It's going to wind down and go away unless it's continually re-stimulated with a lot of effort. So if we ever get people really understanding where they can go in consciousness with love, there will be no stopping that wave. It will be like the consciousness genie of humanity being released from the bottle, and there will be no putting that consciousness genie back in the bottle. Once humanity as a whole, as a unified whole, discovers that power that we have, but we can only wield it together, and we can only wield it with love. Yes, I do feel like I'm a starseed. I've had a connection to the Lyran people for a long time, and those memories don't come from hypnosis. Those memories have kind of spontaneously emerged in little bits and pieces down through the years. The first memory came when I was about 18 years old. I was sitting on my sofa and I don't remember what I was doing, but suddenly I was standing on a beach, and the air seemed different, the trees seemed different. There was like this, the ocean out to sea over here, and there was this cliff over here with tall, thin cypress trees on the top of the cliff. And I'm walking on this beach, and then I look out to sea, and there's this huge tidal wave coming. That was the first memory that came back spontaneously. And then down through the years there have been more. It's like doing a group meditation where I said, to remember part of who I was in the past. And in that group meditation, this came to me. And these memories are so powerful. They're just as powerful as any memory from this lifetime. And it was of flying on in a craft that was specifically tuned to me. And I was flying over this very pristine, beautiful landscape that reminds me very much of Pandora and Avatar. And just flying around, not on one of those creatures, but in a craft. And that was a really powerful memory. And then I've had memories of childhood there. And the craft that I was flying in was made for me as a child. And when I was a little girl, I could make it go wherever I wanted to go around the whole planet. But my parents were tuned to it as well. And so if they wanted me to come home, they would send a message to the craft, please bring her home now. And then I couldn't talk to the craft anymore. It would take me home. It would listen to my parents instead of me. So that was kind of cool. And then there was, this is hard. Then there was having to leave Lyra. And what happened was some reptilians came and they wanted to, they talked with our elders and they said, we are in trouble on our planet and we need to mine some minerals that you have on your planet. And we would like it if we could be allowed to do that. They were very respectful at first. And then they started their mining operation, and we would kind of, watch from different angles what they were doing. And then they started mining outside of the area that they were supposed to. And when they were confronted about this, they killed some of our elders and some of our people. And we didn't have any of that kind of behavior in our whole race memory. So it was like, it was just absolute shock and trauma. You know, we didn't realize that such things could do, and we thought we were going to live forever, because we lived perpetually in these bodies that didn't get old, that didn't die. You know, we had really long lifespans. Just to give an idea, I was like 70 years old, but still considered a teenager. And things just got worse from there, and they started killing more of our people. A few of our people tried to make themselves into warriors to confront this threat. It didn't go very well because we weren't a warrior people. And so finally the reptilians were overrunning the whole planet, and we realized we had to leave from there. And my parents and my uncle, who was like a really close, like a second father, they got me on one of the ships, and they stayed behind to cover the escape, because all the young people were being put on these ships. Some were going here, some were coming here to Earth, some went to the Pleiades, but it was like Lyran's seeds just kind of going out over the whole galaxy, because our planet was overrun by the reptilians, and they were killing people. They were killing us. So I went on a ship that was coming to Earth. I had to watch my parents be left behind, because they were part of a group that was going to cover our escape on these craft we were leaving on. It was like different arcs going out into the galaxy. And so here I am on one of these ships, and I'm like traumatized, like I'm leaving behind everything I've ever known, everything I've ever loved, and just going to a new planet that I don't know what it's going to be like. And all of us were in shock on this ship. And finally we get to Earth, and I remember coming off the ship and throwing myself on the ground and just trying to hug the planet, because I was so glad to have a planet to bond with again, because I was so bonded to Lyra. And it was hard, and we had some recovery time, and then we started working with the local flora and fauna on Earth to try to evolve a species more like ourselves. And that grew later on into the Atlantean civilization, which, because part of what happened with the reptilians on Lyra, it left us with a residue of fear and, oh, if we're going to be afraid of these things that will come and get us, then maybe we need to find some way to defend ourselves against them. And so one group of Lyrans wanted to go with our old philosophies of love and nurturance and stewarding the land and so on and so forth. And then another group thought, no, we're targets as long as we don't have any defenses. We don't want what happened on Lyra to happen here, you know. So we have to make technology that can function when we can't, because we've learned that when we're really traumatized, we're like, you know, we can't function. So they wanted to design technology that could function when they couldn't, you know, so that they would be able to have that protection. And so that group and the other group, they kind of weren't seeing eye to eye, and so the new group that wanted the technology, they split off and they made the Atlantean civilization. That was the offshoot that made the Atlantean civilization, at least as I remember it. And I went to the Atlantean civilization as an observer. I believed in the old ways, but I knew that some people had to go to this new experiment that was happening in Atlantis and see what was going on. So I went there and I got caught up in incarnations there. And then over time Atlantis fell because it collapsed under its own weight, because that seed of fear that we carried as Lyrans from the reptilian invasion and the destruction of our planet, we carried that seed here to Earth. And that's what helped the Atlantean civilization grow into what it became. And at first it was really good for a long time. It was really a good civilization. But then it turned wrong. You know, there was genetic experimentation. There was thing in here. You know, I think I wrote in here that that whether the priesthood became a tool of politics or whether politics became a tool of the priestcraft, it was hard to tell, because they were both corrupt. The government and the priesthood were both corrupt. And the way it ended for me there was at the very end of Atlantis. I was a young girl who, when I was born, I had all the gifts intact that I came with from Lyra, you know, being able to see visions and so on and so forth. And so my father tried to keep me out of that priesthood life, but they found out about me anyway, and then I got put into the priesthood, and we worked with a huge crystal in the temple to try to keep the energies balanced in Atlantis. And then, but I would have visions, and they would come in dreams, like nightmares, and I kept having this nightmare of Atlantis being destroyed with earthquakes and tidal waves. And I would wake up sweating. And then one day I woke up and I was really calm, and I knew today was the day the tidal waves were going to come. And I thought, I don't want to be in the city with all the panic and everything. So I went to another initiate and I said to him, today's the day, it's going to be happening today. And it was really early in the morning. And I went down to that beach that I remembered when I was 18 years old. And I met him down there, and we stood there together and watched the wave come, and we held each other, and it took us. And that's the first time I remember actually dying in the body. And dying really isn't anything to be afraid of, because there was like an instant of intense pressure, crushing pressure, and it was terrifying, but only for an instant. And then suddenly I was out of my body and I was in a place of pure light. So dying isn't really the hard thing. The manner of dying maybe, but not dying itself. Like Ram Dass used to say, it's like taking off a tight shoe. So I think they try to use us and our abilities to further their agendas. And those that they can't use are getting vaccinated and getting autism. Way back there's a Bible story about when Jesus was going to be born. It was prophesied that a child was going to be born in Bethlehem and he would end up being king of the Jews. And this prophecy came to the ears of King Herod, who was king of the Jews at that time, and he didn't want anybody supplanting him. So as the time of the prophecy came close, he decreed that all male children under the age of 2 years old should be put to death. And that happened. But Jesus' parents somehow got a warning and a vision from an angel, and they fled, so they got away. So Jesus wasn't killed. But today we have the same thing going on, only it's with vaccines. Vaccines are killing young people, a lot of really special young people, or they're making them autistic and turning their gifts inward on themselves. You know, so it's kind of the same kind of thing happening again, where it's not all male children are under 2 are being killed, but the vaccinations are really compromising entire generations of young people. And it really has to stop. In that session, I ended up visiting the ship where my Lyran people are still living, and the commander of the ship said, "We're going to do some astral travel together here." He said, "I'm going to take and show you some things," and he showed me the surface of Mars, and that human beings are on Mars now doing excavations in the Cydonia area. And that's why we don't get pictures of that area anymore. And that there are bases there, both above ground and below ground. And then he said, now we're going to go to the moon of the past when you were there. And those things were happening to you. And I said, I don't want to go anywhere near that place again. He said, you need to see this, so come with me and you will be safe. And so we went there, and he showed me an exchange that happened between the military officer in charge of my time on the moon and a very tall, willowy extraterrestrial that was also on the moon. And this is when I got the sense of, like Corey said, the moon is like neutral territory, that all kinds of races that would ordinarily be warring are on good behavior there. Because I often got the impression from some ETs that I would see that they were not happy with what was happening on the human bases, but they were not allowed to interfere. So anyway, this ET is having this conversation with this military officer in charge of my time on the moon, and he can see who I am and who I'm connected to in my aura, because he has that ability to see auras and see energy. He says, "You have no idea who you have there. Do you realize that everything you're doing to her gets reported back to her people?" And I think that's what got me out of that situation. And some of the other things that came from the Mary Rodwell session was realizing that I would visit the ship at night, not all nights, but a lot of nights. I would go out there to the ship, and it's like I'm a recorder, and I'm recording everything of what it's like to be on planet Earth and live in this body and have my experiences. And then I go into the ship, and I go into this like glass tube, and as soon as I'm in the glass tube in my astral body, they turn on something, they turn a switch on, and these sound and light waves bounce back and forth inside the tube, bouncing back off the walls of the tube and passing through my form. And as they pass through my form, they upload all of my experiences and feelings and thoughts and everything into a very, very advanced quantum type of computer that looks more like a bunch of beautiful holograms than anything else. And then any one of my Lyran people can go to that console and relive what I've been through, or re-experience what I've been through and learn from it. And it gives them some ideas of the ways that they can intervene here on Earth, which isn't a lot. But still, they're really interested in trying to get the original human experiment back on track for what it's supposed to be, not what it's been made into. Because I've become so aware of the things that happen to me and a possible role of that, whatever is driving me from my heart to every heart that's listening to this and everybody else out there, I want us all to be our personal best. And that means absolute freedom, absolute responsibility, and absolute truth. We have to have it all. And then we have to become, you know, what we're meant to become, which is really glorious beings of light and awareness and understanding that love is the most cohesive force in the universe, and that is where our destiny lies. I would say, yes, to one degree or another, everyone on this planet is mind-controlled. And that's because if we go way back in time to the beginning of the human race, and that date is in question quite a bit these days, but the human race is far more ancient than normal science and history would allow us to believe. So from the very beginning, those that would be our controllers and our masters have traumatized us, or shown us someone being traumatized with the threat that it could happen to us. That's a form of indoctrination through fear. And it's been happening from the very first by those who would be our controllers. And they've managed to control our thoughts. There's a saying out there that says, our thoughts make the world around us through the quantum field. Because what we think, we make it real. And the thing of it is when we've been indoctrinated and controlled and had our consciousness farmed and managed and programmed down through the millennia to produce, if our thoughts make the world, then who controls our thoughts? These beings have been controlling the way we think and how we feel, and keeping our emotions running on overdrive, you know, intense fear, intense anger, hatred, and everything else like that. They've been trying to keep these emotions running amok and keep the thoughts going in particular directions so that we, all collective humanity, are spinning out a version of reality from the quantum field that serves them and keeps them on top and keeps us subject to them. But we're the ones supplying the energy. We're the ones with the consciousness that is supplying the energy for that matrix. And the matrix film was very powerful. But we're not, our bodies are not batteries plugged into a big machine. It's our consciousness that's plugged in to these people and what they want our world and for us to be. And they're using us for a resource. They're mining us. And they're not just mining our consciousness, they're mining our DNA and sending it off planet. And this kind of crap has just got to be exposed, and it's got to stop. And people need to become aware of all this stuff. And they need to understand that if you want a better world, then we are going to have to work together to create it. We can't do it alone in isolation. We have got to come together as a unified, conscious, and loving whole. And we have to envision the future that we would want for ourselves and our children and make it happen. And we have to throw off the programming and control. And so I just focus on the energy of the word and what it means to me and what it means in the collective consciousness. And then I just kind of tune into that and I let something out. And that's how that works. And it's just, it's so life-affirming and it's so peaceful. And whatever comes out is so beautiful. And each one is unique. I mean, some of them will sound alike, but each one is unique, just like sunrises and sunsets. No two are ever alike, but they're beautiful. And I'm really glad that I have the gift of doing that.
What's a message you would share with everybody who could see this that's struggling, really lost, feeling hopeless about, you know, humanity even making it through this experience?
Just know that there's something very special inside each and every one of you. Like I said, we really do have the keys to the castle. But we have to come together in love, unity, and cooperation to wield them. We can't do it any other way.
This is delayed. Hey there everybody, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the presentation that I offered and the interview we just showed of Niara. And now we're going to move into the live Q&A section of this presentation. I just want to make it known, Niara's book right here, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. And we will be referencing it. Niara might even read a couple passages from it throughout this live chat. And to begin things off, you know, there's a lot of talk out there by various people in the ufology community about there's only positive extraterrestrials, there's only negative extraterrestrials. Discuss a little bit of your experience with kind of both polarities and where you think humanity needs to expand their consciousness and what they need to understand about that issue?
Well, I definitely think there's both, just like we have good and bad people on the planet. And I think it's really naive to assume that they're all good. The Greys, they're kind of a conundrum, because I think there are groups that are definitely negative and definitely using humanity for their own purposes. And the more I've studied the Archon phenomenon, which I think the Greys and reptilians are related to, you know, they're definitely negative. They're here for their own purposes and their own service to themselves. Even the hybridization program, it may be something that they're trying to do to maybe even take our planet away. You know, you have to wonder what the what all the agendas are behind chemtrailing. You know, because I think it's not just one simple thing with chemtrails. I think there's multiple. You know, there's multiple agendas with the chemtrailing scenario. So, and then we have the reptilians, and there are good and bad groups of reptilians.
Right.
There was a group of raptors that Mark Richards, you know, Joanne Richards.
Right, Captain Mark Richard.
Yeah. And he talked about a group that had a treaty with the United States government, and he played with their children, a raptor child, as when he was a child. And so these were obviously not vicious or going to do anything to the humans that were their friends. So it's as intricate and varied as human relationships are. So again, there's good and bad. There are those that are spiritually evolved, and there are those that just want conquest, power, and control. So is that, you know, that's kind of my experience with, not just experience, but with all my research as well.
Right, and that just seems the most logical. I mean, polarity isn't going to end in our atmosphere. There's naturally going to be good and bad throughout the cosmos, just to give contrast.
Yeah.
And, you know, that also then gets into humanity and them understanding the powers of their own consciousness and what exactly that entails. So if you were to look at humanity on a grand scale right now, I mean, what would you tell them about consciousness? What would you want them to understand about it?
Well, Reagan was quoted as saying...
I'm just going to fix your microphone because we want to make sure they hear you.
Okay.
So it's pointed away from you.
Okay, let's get it.
Okay. We're just going to...
You guys get to see this live. We'll cut it out of this.
Yeah. Okay, is that better?
That's Renee.
Okay.
He's the artist.
Okay.
And the technician. He's multi-talented.
All right.
Great.
So I was going to use Reagan's quote to go into this, where he was quoted as saying, you know, wouldn't we all forget our differences and our wars and all of our contentiousness if an alien threat was threatening this planet from outside of our world? Well, that's actually already happened in a way. You know, these archons or reptilians or some groups of the Greys, I'm not painting them all with the same brush, but some of them are definitely negative service to self entities. And they have threatened our world, and they've come here and they've been manipulating not only our DNA, but they've been manipulating, farming, and managing our consciousness for millennia, from the very beginning, to the point that we have been culturally traumatized as human beings to forget who and what we really are and the power that we have inherent within us. And so I'm sure many of the people watching this have probably seen the Matrix films, you know, starring Keanu Reeves. The Matrix is real, but it's not our bodies that are plugged into it like human bioelectrical batteries. It's our consciousness that's plugged into it at a quantum level. Because if there is a saying about quantum mechanics that fits to it, is that our thoughts make the world. What's really true is our thoughts and our emotions make the world we live in, because our thoughts are one part of it. They hold the vision in one way or another, and then our emotions power the vision. So when we have all the fear porn that's spun out on the TV, it powers a lot of negative emotions: fear, hatred, anger, disgust, those kinds of emotions. And it's a win-win for these creatures, because the archons feed on the energy, the negative energy produced by negative emotions. Mm-hmm. So they're feeding off that energy. Meanwhile, those negative emotions are keeping our consciousness shut down. Greg Braden has a video out on YouTube where he shows how the frequency of love will move through DNA and turn on more of the codons in our DNA and start evolving us into an upward, how do I want to put it? You know, kind of
start turning on our junk DNA.
Yeah, turning on our junk DNA
accessing those latent abilities,
making us become who we are, and it does. It turns on the latent abilities, just like you just said. So the powers that be know that, so they keep serving up fear porn and more wars and more drama. You know, lots of high drama, and they want to keep the consciousness shut down. So if there is a surge of positive emotion, then they'll want to counter it with coming out with something negative to try to keep it locked down.
Right.
And I just would ask people, what do you think? You know, why all the surveillance? Why are our private lives not private anymore? Why are we being watched and controlled on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, through Google and Gmail? Everything we're doing is being tracked. That's because they're really afraid they have to keep watching us and watch how we're awakening, so that they can bring in something to bring the emotional quality down. Mm-hmm. so that we don't turn on those codons and we don't evolve into who we're meant to be. And that's because we're like a human herd to them, and they're managing and controlling our consciousness, and they're even taking people off planet. And David Paulides talks about the people that disappear from campgrounds without you have being put in DNA of 22 different ET species. I heard it again from Alex Collier, and then I've heard it from Corey Good, you know. And Alex Collier said the Andromedans, which were his contact group, considered us genetic royalty because of all the different genetic sampling we have in our DNA. This makes us a very valuable genetic commodity, because the things that are in that latent or junk DNA are highly sought after traits that then they can take the DNA and put it into other beings out in the universe.
And isn't it because we are so emotional as humans as well? A lot of other species out there don't necessarily have that emotion to put their vision to manifestation like us humans do.
Yes, very true. And the emotion shouldn't be running amok. You know, I mean, we see negative stuff on TV and we get angry or depressed or sad or something like that. And our emotions are continually pushed out of control. And I write about that in the book. Emotions are constantly pushed to the dramatic and the out of control thing. And what we really need to learn to do with our emotions is manage them and use them with laser focus, combined with our thoughts and how we want to visualize or think how we want the world to be. And then we take those thoughts of the way we'd like it to be and we charge them with our emotional energy, which is like the energy of electricity lighting up a light. Yeah. You know, it's like that. That's what it's meant to be. But they want to keep those emotions keep spinning out of control because they don't want us to ever focus that energy. Because if it's focused by unified, loving humanity, it is game over for them.
Right.
Game over.
Right. Anger and sadness aren't bad. They're natural human emotions. It's only bad when they go uncontrolled and then they start running you in ways that your higher self doesn't necessarily want. We were talking last night, we were chit-chatting, and you mentioned something about the differences between fear and love and the perpetuation mechanisms of each. That really interested me. Can you repeat that here?
Can you tell me a little bit more?
It was about how fear is it always needs another stimuli to continue going, and how love can always continue.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I was years ago, which I hope to do them again, drumming and dance workshops. And I found that when people were drumming and dancing out their negative emotions and clearing them, then they would move into a love and joy cycle with dancing and drumming, and they could go and go and go and go and go until the body would drop from exhaustion, but they'd drop happy, you know, and just, you know, laugh and whatever like that. But with negative emotions, they're always threatened by entropy, running down and just becoming dead, you know. But with love and joy and positive emotions, they keep building on themselves. They keep making more of themselves, and they can go forever. There's so much negative stuff on the media that we tend to kind of forget that we have this love energy that's so powerful, that if we just hold that in ourselves and show by example ways to use it in the world, then we're going to keep creating more of it. You know, the more, it's like the more, one of my teachers once said, the more you appreciate the people around you and the things around you, the more it increases your opportunities to appreciate, because it just keeps building and building. You know, it's like you go to a restaurant and your server does a really nice job, and you say, you know, I haven't had service like this in a restaurant in 6 months. You've been really, really good to us today. And that person is going to feel, they're going to smile, and they're going to say thank you very much, and they're going to walk away in a positive field of energy. And then maybe they'll go in the kitchen and they'll share an appreciation with someone in the kitchen. You know, thanks for fixing the food so good, because I just got this wonderful appreciation from my customers.
They're going Yelp and go, thank you guys.
Yeah. And then maybe a cook goes and appreciates somebody else for, you know, contributing to that. You know, I mean, it just keeps going. But with negative energy and negative emotions, they're going to run down eventually. They're just going to go into
nothingness. So I've got a couple questions here that I want to reference the chat with.
Sure.
Do you have more memories coming to the surface as other people start coming out with their testimonies, or vice versa? Or have you triggered anybody with your testimony for them to have memories come back to the surface?
Not to my knowledge as far as me triggering other people. You know, I mean, it does happen. I do get emails from time to time, and I get so much email, it's very hard to answer personally, almost next to impossible sometimes. There's only one of me. I'm everything from the janitor to the CEO of my little enterprise. So it just doesn't work. But I do hear stories about people that I've triggered something for, and sometimes I'll hear something that triggers something for me. One time, I was getting a massage by a massage therapist who was really a wonderful person, but it triggered a flashback in me because he rested his hands quite lightly right here just before starting, and it was so close enough to my throat that I just sat up on the table. It's like, you know, because I had this memory of someone choking me. And that was a flashback that has come along, and it's kind of evolved. I've remembered more and more of it as I was ready to remember more and more of it. And it was a pretty horrible memory. It was a horrible memory of being strangulated till I lost consciousness, and then being allowed to revive, and then having it done all over again. And I'm sure that in those moments that I was unconscious, I probably had near-death experiences that I haven't remembered. I'd like to remember them someday. And someday possibly I will, but that's a horrible memory, and that's one that also keeps me awake nights. It's gotten better over the years, but it's been a really rough one to live with.
Yeah. Would you ever consider writing a book completely about Lyra?
Oh, I'd love to if I could find the time.
Someone said they would love that. So maybe some ideas about different books.
Yeah.
And let's see here. What are your thoughts on the 5G rollout? We were actually just, I think we chatted about that last night as well. So very synchronistic question.
Well, we're already so bombarded by different forms of radiation in our environment that to step it up another gigabyte is going to be rough. And it'll be interesting to see if it actually does make it out there how we deal with it. Some of the things that can protect us is staying grounded, getting out with your bare feet on the earth. If you haven't seen the film Grounded, or I think that was the name of it, Grounded, and it shows that the earth actually emits an energy that when we're in contact with the earth with our bare feet, we get this wonderful energy that's healthy. It reduces inflammation in the body and everything, and I sleep on a grounding sheet at night.
I think we literally absorb electrons from the earth when we have
negative ions, actually. And so that's one way to defeat it. And I'm wearing a shungite, which can help with EMF energy. And it's definitely helped me spend a little more time at the computer than I've been able to tolerate. And
yeah, it's one difficult thing about writing a book. I mean, I'm sure you'd love to write another one on Lyra, but it's so difficult.
It's hard to be in the EMF. I'm thinking about actually dictating the book into a recorder, and then seeing if I can use a voice-to-text thing to take the dictation and put it in there.
Cool.
So that voice-to-text makes so many mistakes that sometimes it's counterproductive because you have to go hunt down all the mistakes. And they're not misspelled, so they're hard to find.
Let's see here. So with your interactions with non-terrestrial beings, of course there's the Greys and the reptilians you mentioned, but what about other races, positive or negative, but say feline or avian or mantis even? What are your experiences with different kinds of beings like that?
Mostly experience with the Lyrans, who are my people, who keep close tabs on me and monitor me. And
are they human-like?
They're human-like.
Gotcha.
Very human-like. They're very loving. We don't really use names. We know each other by our vibrational signature, because everybody has a unique vibrational signature. And so that's how we know each other. And of course, we have kind of a telepathic connection and manner of communication. So it's not just thought transmission, but emotional transmission as well. And there was one of my hypnosis sessions with Mary Wildwell. I found that I would go to the Lyran ship while I would sleep here on Earth, and I would be in my astral form, and I would go into this glass tube, and they would turn on a switch, and sound and light waves would pass through my astral body and bounce back and forth on the inside of this tube. So here's a glass tube, and the energy is moving back and forth through the tube, bouncing on the walls of the tube, and keeps passing through my astral form, not doing any harm to it. But what it's doing is it's taking all my Earth experience and uploading it into their extremely sophisticated computer systems on the ship. And then any one of my Lyran people can go to a console and re-experience and learn what it is to be an Earth human. And then they take that information and try to determine how they can help us without violating our free will by doing something really overt. So that's the way that they use that information.
Gotcha.
And just trying to think. And then I have a mantis being that I call my spirit guardian, because he's more of a guide. He's more there watching out for me. And I had a really interesting experience with him one night. I was sleeping over at a friend's house, and her house is built on Native American burial ground. And so I had a dream at night where I was having all kinds of weird dreams and invasive kind of
Did you know this beforehand, that your house is built on that? Or?
No, I didn't really know.
She told you after.
Yeah. And so there I go, and I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, oh man, where is this dream coming from? And I had a feeling that it wasn't quite a dream, that something was around. And in my inner vision, I closed my eyes and was trying to just kind of push it away. And in my inner vision, I could see my mantis being guide, and his eyes, which usually are really placid looking, he's got these really huge mantis eyes.
Right.
Well, in this case, they were glowing red-orange, and he was standing with his arms out, and he had like a webbing here that looked like wings, and he had his arms out like this. And he said, "This woman is under my protection. Leave now." And they were gone.
So it's a very vivid, deep dream that you had that
very
really
vivid.
stuck out to you. Interesting.
Except that part wasn't a dream that I just said. This was after I woke up, felt that something was still there, and I closed my eyes to try to make it go away myself. And
that's when you had that.
The mantis, and I closed my eyes not to sleep, but I was just closing my eyes to concentrate, and that's when I saw, I call him MB.
Mantis being.
Yeah, mantis being.
Interesting.
So that's how that was. But that's that experience, and I also feel that I've had some interactions with Pleiadians.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, good question here, actually. Have you had any experiences with any recent solar flare or cosmic energies that are coming through?
Yeah. They don't seem to be affecting me too badly. I've been able to maintain my energy and everything fairly well. I have had over that solar flare period that we are going through right now. Sometimes I'll have a wakeful night.
Gotcha.
And it won't be just apartment noise. It'll be something else, some kind of energy going on. So I'm very sensitive to energy.
You are. You are. What do you think ascension will be like, that process? And I know that's a very kind of large question, but no strings really attached with this one. Just kind of speculate, throw out what you think will happen.
Well, I'll just say this to begin with. If you have any preconceived notions of what ascension's going to be like, I would dump them.
Probably won't be like that.
Because if it's like, if you have an impression of what it's going to be like, and it comes to you, and it's nothing like what you imagined,
it's going to kind of let you down, isn't it?
Yeah, you might miss it. You know, it's I've got so many thoughts firing off here. It's hard to pick one.
I know, and it's amazing how everybody has their own specific thought, but then if our thoughts manifest reality, well, how are we exactly going to manifest that reality if everybody's mind is going every which way?
Well, it's like people, they have an idea in their mind about what an ascended master is like. And you know, a really high spiritual master. They have an idea of what that looks like. You know, maybe they're wearing long flowing white robes and everything else like that. And then suddenly you're driving out of the Walmart parking lot, and one of the panhandlers out there who's asking for money, you know, who looks really grubby. Well, maybe for some reason you stop and you hand somebody a $5 bill. You might have just handed a master a $5 bill who was in disguise.
That was your test,
who was
right
testing you to see. But if you're not aware that masters can come in all guises, you can miss it.
Yeah, we have these expectations for what it is.
So I would dump all the expectations of what ascension is and tune in to your inner experience and just feel your way. Because that's how it's going to happen for all of us, I believe. We're going to have to feel our way without expectations and just look at it.
Gotcha.
Just look at what we're experiencing inside.
Great advice. One comment here says that your song feels like a beacon in a way, and they're asking what connections have people made to that song, and if you've gotten any feedback about it, any, you know, specific things.
Was it, which one was it?
What connections have people made to your song? And what kind of feedback do you get from
people find it very healing. They find it very uplifting. They get, you know, a lot of tingles, you know, goosebumps. And it's my intention that whenever I sing some of the channeled things that I do, it's my intention that people are uplifted, healed, or comforted in some way. And that maybe a new doorway opens up inside of them with a deeper understanding. That's my intention when I sing.
So your intention is just to purely help people find their way.
Yeah.
In a way.
And I would really like to do a recording of like an album of all kinds of different channeled singing.
That would be fantastic. That would be amazing.
I need to get my energy back. I mean, I'm doing okay today because I'm doing what I'm really passionate about. But a lot of times at home, I suffer from a lot of exhaustion because of the sleep issues of many years now. Yeah.
This is kind of, I got two different questions here, but we can bridge them into one. what is the best way you can transmute trauma in this life? And do you feel like you can heal past life traumas in this life?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of bringing awareness to it, looking at it, understanding it. One of the tools that has really helped me is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. That's where you do the tapping here and then, here and here and all on the face. And that can really help to desensitize the nervous system from reacting to the trauma as it comes to mind all the time. It can really kind of like dial the volume down on the trauma.
Gotcha.
But you have to stay with it
until
it's flatlined. You never have a reaction to it again. And then you have to fight that part of yourself that says, I was traumatized. I should feel this way.
The victim kind of mentality. Gotcha.
Yeah. It's like, well, if I don't feel unhappy about the trauma that happened to me, does that mean that I'm, saying that it was okay for people to traumatize me? I mean, it's not a thought form that really makes sense. But when you're trying to work to clear your trauma, those kinds of strange thoughts do come up.
Gotcha. So yes, you can definitely heal past life trauma in this life, and then different ways to transmute that. EFT technique, getting out of the victim mindset, taking responsibility for your own thoughts. Any other ways? I know you're doing a lot of physical cleansing right now. I know you have a lot of examples in your book. I was just skimming through it. So
there's
what else really helps
type of work called somatic experiencing work. And that was, for me, sitting with a therapist, and I would talk about what was traumatizing to me, and then she would have me report all the body sensations that I was feeling as I related the trauma. And I'd say, well, I'm having pain and tightness in my shoulders, or I'm having tingling in my hands and my wrists, or my legs feel all this energy like they just want to get up and run, so you just kind of report in minute detail as much as you can, as descriptive as you can, what you're feeling in your body as you tell the story of your trauma. And in just reporting and observing how it's happening in your body, you actually begin to clear it. And the other thing that I'd like to get back to is drumming and dancing, because that can help clear trauma.
Right.
I used to do it not for just a jam, but I used to do drumming and dance for emotional release and healing. And I'm hoping to get back to that work, because I think it could really be powerful for what I'm trying to do today.
Right, because when you give your testimony and people ask you questions, I mean, it's often so focused on, well, what happened and what was going on and where were you and all these things about the past, but it doesn't necessarily focus on what that's doing to you now, how that's affected your emotions and your relationships and all of that. So can you talk for a minute on how it has impacted you?
On how the trauma's impacted me? Or
just everything. I mean, coming forward, the attacks you faced through coming forward, how your life has changed now emotionally by coming forward, what differences that's made.
Well, once I got the memories back, I felt kind of set apart from the rest of humanity. And no matter how sympathetic people are, they can't really wrap their head around
sympathy and empathy are two far different things.
Yeah. Even empathic people, they have to kind of shut that down a little bit if they're really close to me, because they can pick up on it. But still, when you have these kinds of experiences, it sets you apart from the rest of humanity. And there's a few people out there that have had similar experiences, and when you meet up with them, you really have a bond and an understanding, because you've shared something that unites you. But this is kind of sad, but I feel isolated a lot just by the experiences that I've had.
I think we all do in a way.
Yeah. And in my home community, I mean, I have friends, I interact with people and everything else like that, but there's still this part of me that is held back because I know they're just not going to understand the extreme level of what I went through. And it's, I don't know, it creates an isolation.
They just haven't had that experience, so they literally can't.
And I wouldn't want them to have it.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's... It's simply they cannot understand it. They can.
So it's isolating, and someday when my time is here and it really comes and I pass into the great beyond, I'll be washed clean of all of it and I can start over again someplace else. But right now, my experiences now are for doing what we're doing today, talking about it, letting people know that zero-point energy is real, letting people know that mind control trauma is real, and letting people know that the power of united, conscious, focused human consciousness is real. And of all the things that I talk about, that's probably the most important one, because it's such a game changer. But again, like I've said in my interview last night, it's a powerful tool, but we have to come together in love and stop our fighting and stop all the divisiveness and stop all the hatred in order to wield this power that we have. We can't wield it any other way except by coming together in love and focused intention and awareness.
Amazing. Let's see. Question here about your telepathic communication with any of the beings. Do you have an ability to dialogue with them?
Sometimes.
Gotcha.
They said, the earth life really takes a lot of our attention all the time. And I had a dialogue with my Lyran family. And I said, why don't you guys talk to me more? It seems like I get little snippets here and there, and why don't you talk to me more? And they said, we actually talk to you quite a bit. It's just that when you ask a question, you become receptive enough to hear us.
Gotcha.
So I have to learn to be more receptive without the questioning, and I'm still working on that.
Gotcha.
Another thing that interferes with that is a lot of the exhaustion I feel a lot of the time. But I'm hoping that's getting better. I'm taking some steps to heal now.
Right.
Physically.
Do you have any advice on increasing contact on a personal level? How to actually get ourselves, whether it's mental or physical contact with non-terrestrials?
I think that if you feel like you're a starseed, I would focus and try to read up on all the different types. There's the Lyrans, the Pleiadians, there's Syrians. There's all these different species that are talked about out there. And if you feel a real pull or attraction to one in particular, like if you feel like you really are interested in the Syrians, you may have a connection there. That part of your ET genome may be resonating more powerfully with them because that's where your soul lineage may be. So I would pay attention to the different species that you feel attracted to. Some people are attracted to the Arcturian energy, and that probably means that they have had some interaction or are part of that Arcturian star family.
Right.
So I pay attention to that. And my friend Misha Johnston, who lives in Las Vegas and does sky watching tours with night vision goggles.
Gotcha.
She has a chart that you can use a pendulum with, and it has all the different species listed on it. And you just hold the pendulum over and see the pendulum will go more towards one if you're trying to find out who your star family is. And that's one way to try and do it.
So increase contact by getting in there with your own intuition, noticing the synchronicities.
Yeah.
What about, say, as you were mentioning earlier, Earth is a very just low vibratory, dense place.
Yeah.
So simply, as a lot of people say, kind of increase your own loving vibration that you emit. I think that'd be a
we
easy
have a lot
way.
of that. Another thing is to read the books of Lissa Royal. She wrote a book called The Prism of Lyra, and it was about how Lyra was the place where a lot of the ET races came out of and spread throughout the galaxy. And so you'll get a smattering of all the different types of ET groups that are out there that are positive and loving. And if you feel an attraction to one as you're reading, then I would investigate that one and see if if that's a really resonant energy for you. But again, this isn't something that you can scientifically plot on a chart. It's quite individual, and it's something you feel within your own self. And the more you live with that vibration, you'll find out if you're correct in your assumption or if you're not. Just by living it. That's the thing. Whatever you believe is a good way to live. Live according to those beliefs, and life itself will teach you what is out of harmony about your belief system.
There you go. Are you familiar with 1260 timekeeping and 1312 or 1320 timekeeping?
Not specifically with that terminology, but I do know that there is a different calendar, a 13-month calendar, that's supposed to be like more Mayan-oriented.
Gotcha.
And more feminine-oriented. And, you know, the Gregorian calendar has really come under fire as being kind of a control mechanism. So it's, you know,
sun
but
goes
how
up, sun
to
goes down,
change
it's just
it,
another day.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, this question was asking, do you think our planet will ever transition to some form of new timekeeping?
It probably will at some point, you know, once we've gotten rid of the negative influence on this planet.
And once kind of more realer science begins to come out and they actually start taking celestial movements and astrology into and seriously. Yeah, I can see that happening too.
That would be good. And there's so many things happening on the planet that need our focused energetic attention to try to turn them around. And John Hageland, I think, was the one that came up with, he's the one that's quoted the study that was done, I believe, in Washington, D.C., where they used transcendental meditation to focus on lowering the crime rate.
Right.
And they produced quantifiable, measurable results with that. So consciousness does have an impact. And consciousness in a group is even more powerful. Dean Rodden said, he wrote Entangled Minds, and he's one of the chief scientists of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And he said, this is the reason why one person can buy a lottery ticket and they can pour all their intention and their energy on that ticket to be the winning one, and then the day comes and it didn't win. He said the reason it didn't win is because the whole human collective wasn't behind the intention.
The more you have,
the more you have,
exponential effects.
The more exponential it becomes.
Right.
So we don't need everybody to get on board. We just need a tipping point amount. And I think at this point in the evolution of human consciousness, we definitely have more than 144,000 people who are awakened on this planet.
Yeah, I heard...
awakened or awakening.
Right. I heard a great, just to chime in here, I was listening to Rupert Sheldrake one time, and he was discussing the 100th monkey effect, and he was stating that it's somewhat misconstrued. It's not like we get to a point where there's a certain mass and then we jump, but it's every time more people start jumping on kind of the same thought process or tuning into that collective consciousness, then it just, every time it expounds just more and more and more. So kind of like you said, it's not like we need, boom, this number, but hey, people are waking up faster and faster every day.
Well, it is. It's a whole field of consciousness around the planet. Teilhard de Chardin wrote about it when he called it the noosphere, a field of human thought that surrounds the whole planet, to which we're all connected. And so we get this information at a subtle level that maybe we're not aware of, but it's still, over time, it becomes a part of us. And then we had Carl Jung, the Jungian, you know, the father of Jungian psychology, and he postulated the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious is what I talk about as far as that part of human consciousness as a collective that is farmed, managed, programmed, and controlled by the negative entities on this planet to keep us the human herd resource they want us to be. And that's why they spy on us all the time, because they have to watch for all the signs that we're awakening en masse and try to keep it quashed down. You know, that's why all the surveillance, that's why all the spying, that's why all the drugs and the chemtrails and the GMO foods that are trying to keep consciousness encapsulated and controlled and keep their human herd as their human herd, instead of having us come awake and alive and moving beyond their reach.
Awesome. The past 200 years, the population has exploded compared to the past 2,000 years. Are these specific souls reincarnating or incarnating here for the first time, for that matter, for this time specifically in history?
Okay, can you say the question again?
So the past few hundred years as opposed to the past few thousand, our population is just exploding. So are these souls incarnating here for this specific time?
Yeah, some of them are. You know, some very high energy, very conscious souls have incarnated here, like the starseeds. You know, crystal children, indigo children, star children, rainbow children. We got terminologies for all of them. And they come and incarnate here to try to help. And then as soon as they get here, kind of like I explained in my interview the other night, that Herod wanted to kill all the babies under 2 years old to make sure that this new baby that was going to be the king of the Jews didn't supplant him, didn't take away his power. And so the modern day version of that is vaccinations and making a lot of our special children autistic. And then those children have to find a way to still bring their gift into the world if they can through the autistic process. But then there are some that have escaped that, and they're really offering some amazing gifts, like Elijah Ray. He's just a wonderful, gifted musician who is definitely a starseed. He's definitely one of those crystal children or one of those special children. And there's so many more. You know, there's so many more that are associated now with Corey Good and the things that he's bringing out. And I really love to see that.
That's awesome.
You know, yeah.
We just need
You're one of them.
Thank you.
Yes.
We need to just kind of activate and support all these children that may not have really found their way quite yet, but just slyly push them onto that.
Yeah.
What are the top 2 to 3 areas where humanity should focus their positive intent in order to affect the greatest change?
Well, the general thing that you can do would be to create a vision in your mind, and if you're a tactile feeling person more than a visual person, then feel in your body how you would feel to be living in a beautiful and pristine world. How would that feel in your body? What kinds of sensations would you feel in your body? What kinds of emotions would you feel? And make that as strong and as powerful as you possibly can. And use beautiful music to help enhance it. You know, we got art and music that's there to support our ascension and our energy, you know. So that's the general thing. Just visualize the whole planetary ecosystem as restored, pristine, primeval, and beautiful, the way it should be. Visualize all the animals that are, you know, in danger of extinction, somehow finding a way to repopulate and come back in. You know, visualize. There's so many different aspects of it, but you want the general whole vision of wellness, whether it's visual for you, whether it's auditory, whether it's tactile, whatever your strongest physical sense is, build on that. And then just bring the emotion in with it, because the emotion is the energy that charges the vision, whether it's tactile, auditory, or visual. And then do that. Then the other thing that I think would be a good idea is if there is a specific issue going on the planet that you feel needs to be addressed through consciousness, try to get a group of people together, 8 to 10 if you can, you know, and all focus together on that particular thing that you want to correct. Like, say we wanted to eradicate chemtrails. We would want to have little teams all over the planet visualizing clear blue skies and how beautiful that would be and how wonderful it would feel to have clear blue skies, not be worried about these particulates raining down on our food and water supply. Just visualize that and how it would feel to you to never see a chemtrail in the sky again. How happy would that make you? It's the emotion that you bring to it that charges the vision and sends out the quantum waves to make the positive change.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And to add on that, I mean, I would say the biggest thing you could focus on to affect the greatest change is just simply yourself.
Yeah.
Because as above, so below. If we want the society to change, we just simply change each and every one of us. So focus on your own habits and thoughts and intentions and the ways you live your life.
Example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's nearly it. If anybody else has any last questions, just go ahead and drop them in the chat box. Is there anything you wanted to share out of your book as well?
Yeah, there were a couple of things.
There's a couple of passages you mentioned to me you wanted to read.
Yeah. There's this one. I wrote a book about mental health issues and narcissism. And because we live in such a crazy, bizarro world, like from Superman comics.
Yeah, all these ideas imprinted on our heads about what we should be and how to...
So I thought maybe it would be a good idea in this chapter to put something. So I put this subtitle, Defining Mental Health. And it says, so how do we ourselves determine if we are sane in a meaningful way? We have an ability to self-reflect in a way grounded in reality. We have the facility to look at the facts of things around us and of our interactions with others. We are able to separate our beliefs, opinions, and judgments about people, events, and situations from the reality of the facts themselves. We have the capacity to recognize both our faults and our good qualities and not overindulge in a fixation about either. We have the emotional depth to empathize with others, to vicariously feel what they feel, to understand and respond appropriately from that true empathy. We have the ability to anchor ourselves in the present, distinguishing what is happening in the present from what has happened in the past. We can differentiate the people we're interacting with in our present from how people acted in our past. We understand that the past can have an impact, that we can react without thinking from past hurts, but we return to an understanding of the separation of past from present in people, events, and situations. We can ask if what we have to say is true, necessary, or kind. If what we wish to communicate meets at least two of these criteria, it needs saying. Through empathy, we understand when and how to interact with others and what to say at various moments. We understand the timing and placement of our communication. Through emergency circumstances, though emergency circumstances can make saying certain things necessary out of a situation's urgency. But in our current world, with all the emotions that simmer and move through us, both the pleasant and the dreaded, there is a need at times to define what true emergency is. Emergency is rooted in what's happening around us externally, like heading for a lifeboat on a sinking ship. While the pressure of emotions can feel like an emergency for many of us, if external conditions are not dictating emergency, then it can be wise at such times to pause, breathe, check within, and calm ourselves before proceeding with any words or action. So that's just a little bit of, what I wrote about what it is to be sane and to interact with others in a sane manner, from the heart, from empathy.
Right.
And are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have an interesting question here. Okay. Last couple. Is it counterintuitive, and actually I have some thoughts on this as well, is it counterintuitive to put yourself in negative situations to purposely do shadow work and illuminate your own darkness?
Which one?
Right here, you can read that.
Okay.
I have a quick thought on that. I don't think it's counterintuitive, because if you put yourself in a negative situation to do shadow work, then it's not necessarily a negative situation. You're going into it for positive intention because you're looking to grow. So it wouldn't really be, it might be an uncomfortable situation. You might not, your ego might not like, but your soul will like it because it's growing and improving.
Yeah.
So
I would say I wouldn't put myself in a negative situation because enough of them arise in our life already. We don't have to go looking for them.
Yeah.
But when they do arise, try to respond to it from a place of heart and conscience rather than a knee-jerk angry response or fearful response. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and if you do that, then any negative can turn into a positive. It's just how you're looking and utilizing that situation.
And the one thing about evil is it has a lot to teach us about contrast. Contrast is really what this world and its perceptions and all our spiritual growth is built on. If we're going to grow and learn and evolve spiritually, then we have to have the contrast of good and evil to teach us why we want the good and why the good is important and why we should strive to evolve into the best human beings we can become.
Totally.
It's like, dark doesn't exist without light. This is a world of duality, evil, good, dark, light, wet, dry. There's everything exists in relation to its opposite. And that's there to teach us and to guide us through our lives so that we can evolve into what we are meant to become.
She put it no better than I could. So last question, where can people support your work?
Where can they support my work? Well, I do have a GoFundMe campaign going right now because I've been targeted quite heavily since my book came out. The years from like early 2014 to the spring of 2017 were extremely difficult and extremely stressful and rough. I'm really amazed I got through them without a stroke or a heart attack. And it's left my health really pretty fractured and suffering from long-term sleep deprivation. And some wonderful Facebook friends have started a GoFundMe campaign because I couldn't ask for myself, you know, at that point. You know, I have asked for help, you know, here and there on Facebook for emergencies. But this campaign is about getting me back on my feet, getting me enough money to get back on my feet, get my health back, and create some stability in my life so that I can continue offering to the world the things that I think can help make our world a wonderful place again.
Gotcha. So there's GoFundMe. You can definitely support her by grabbing her book as well.
Yeah, buy the book and tell people about the book. There's so much in here, and it hasn't had the chance. Yeah,
it's a lot thicker than I thought it would be.
So, and I wrote this for all of you. You know, I wrote it to make the world a better place. I poured all my love for all of you and the planet into this book. I didn't write this book to make $1 million. I wrote it to help the planet. And so if you buy the book or if you have the book, leave a good review on Amazon. Tell other people about it. Try to get more people reading it because there's so much in here beyond just my experiences. There's everything I've learned about consciousness and the quantum field and how to work with all these subtle energies to make the world a better place. So that's ways that you can really help me, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
And very last thing, what's your website as well? Because your book's on your website and all that's on there.
My website is facingtheshadow.embracingthelight.com. And that's my primary website now. And I don't get to write as much as I can because I'm having a lot of, like I said, exhaustion. I'm sitting at the computer. I'm exposed to EMF fields. And Eric Rains talked about all this nanotech that they put in my body to keep me in pain. And because of all the metal, you know, that gets into the body, it makes me very sensitive to EMF fields. And I'm doing a lot of heavy metal detox smoothies right now to try to get the metal out of my system, and then I should be able to tolerate sitting at the computer longer. But I'd love to get back to writing, and I will find a way. But I need more healing, and I need a stable home environment that I can create for myself. To, you know, at least provide some foundation for me to be able to continue to do my work in the world.
Well, great. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Find her at her website, her GoFundMe. Go find her book as well. Thank you all for tuning in to this third episode of the Disclosing the Secret Space Program series with myself and Niara Isley. Appreciate you all for tuning in. We'll be back next month on April 21st, and in that installment, I'll be interviewing Emery Smith and also presenting and releasing an interview with him. So that's it for this one, guys. We'll be seeing you soon. Thank you.
And thank you very much from my heart to yours, and I send you all my love. Thank you.